Friendship dances around the world, biting us all to awaken to the recognition of happiness. Epicurus' Ethics are perhaps one of the most understandable writings in the whole of the philosophical canon. Yet often they are disregarded because they belong to the school of hedonism. In this video, we want to reassert this philosophy as a meaningful way of living in modern-day life. Stick around to find out why hedonism means you should just drink water and eat bread and the occasional stick of cheese, why God doesn't love you, and what Epicurus really meant with his concept of a-taraxia. Epicurus was born in 341 BC on the island of Samos. He is the founder of the Epicurist school of thought. Although most probably the most active philosopher in ancient times, only few of his writings are still available, some through text and some even through writings on old runes. Epicurus was deemed a hedonist because he upheld that pleasure was the greatest good for men. Epicurus was famed for having a big garden where he met his friends. On top of the fence of this garden was a sign that read, "Pleasure is the highest good here." He was often criticized for his beliefs as it seemed cheap and shallow at first glance, yet, when studied, revealed profound layers of significance. What is pleasure? To fully grasp what is meant by pleasure, Epicurus introduces the idea of a-taraxia. A-taraxia is a state where we don't suffer. According to Epicurus, pleasure is not the joys of life, but the absence of pain. Take for example hunger. We are in a sort of pain when we are hungry. We strive for food, and once we eat a piece of bread, it fills us with the joy of the taste. Yet for Epicurus, this is not the sort of pleasure we are supposed to strive for. It is the moment after eating the bread, when the hunger has disappeared, that he deems pleasure. The absence of hunger, and thus the absence of pain, is the highest good in Epicurist philosophy. Quick detour. Epicureanism is thus not a hedonist theory in the full sense of the word. In my understanding, there is only one such example, and it is an African tribe that goes by the name of Cyrenaics. They upheld that one should run after women and earthly pleasure to one's heart's content. An urban myth, which I wasn't able to confirm, states that many of them committed suicide. Back to the matter at hand. Let's be honest, there aren't a lot of contemporary Epicureans around anymore. While Epicureanism faltered, Stoicism has exploded in recent times. The teachings of Epicurus haven't really thrived, yet his teachings were deeper than only the idea of a-taraxia. Epicurus upheld that the philosopher should be like a doctor. A doctor prescribes medicine for the body, and the philosopher should prescribe a medicine for the mind. Tetra Pharmakon. It is in this way that Epicurus introduces his Tetra Pharmakon, or four-bodied medicine for the mind. He introduces 4 rules to live life according to the principles of a-taraxia. 3 types of desires: the fear of pain, the fear of gods, and the fear of death. 3 types of desires. The most important element of the Tetra Pharmakon is dealing with urges and desires. The urges and desires were often discussed in ancient times. The body was abhorred and the mind defied because desire tyrannically imposed itself on man. To escape this tyranny, Epicurus distinguished between 3 different types of desires. These are the fundamental and natural desires, such as food and drinks, the non-fundamental but natural desires, such as drinking a glass of wine or buying nice clothes, and then there are the non-fundamental and non-natural desires, which include, for example, our desire for respect, power, or gambling. Epicurus argues that it is up to us to set a limit to our desires. The fundamental and natural desires are easy to obtain and bring us happiness, while the non-fundamental and non-natural desires are a quest in the infinite, a quest which we are unable to quench. For example, gambling. Are we ever happy with the profit we make, or is our desire going to constantly make us want more? How about power? Do we not recognize the same pattern there? These types of desires must be kept in check because they can be taken to extremes and start to terrorize us. However, this does not mean that we have to survive on bread and water alone, but in theory, according to Epicurus, a happy life needs nothing more than a piece of bread, water, and the occasional stick of cheese. For Epicurus, it is mainly about practical knowledge. Practical knowledge, or phronesis, the art of being modest in dealing with our desires. Fear of pain, or the hedonist calculus. About the fear of extreme or prolonged pain, Epicurus writes that the most severe pain is of the shortest duration. If you suffer from long-term pain, you should try to balance it with pleasure. Thus, Epicurus writes on his deathbed, "I write this to you on this happy day, which will also be my last. the colic and pain caused by dysentery are so severe that worse is not possible. But for me, against all this, there is the spiritual joy of remembering the conversations we had. We erase every suffering in this way by juxtaposing it with the joy of a memory. Because of this principle, according to Epicurus, we should not fear extreme suffering. Fear of the gods. A third principle of the Tetra Pharmakon concerns our fear of the gods. The thought that the gods are supreme and can influence our life can cause fear for many people. However, according to Epicurus, we do not have to fear the gods because they have no influence on our lives. He writes, "What is happy and imperishable has no trouble itself, nor does it cause trouble to anyone else." The gods are perfect beings and are in a state of perfect happiness. They have no need to intervene in our lives because this would just bring them bad luck. Fear of the gods is therefore not necessary, says Epicurus. Fear of death. Since the soul is mortal, death appears to us as a limit. There is no afterlife, and our life is transient. Previously, Plato wrote that one must learn to die in order to let go of the body. Now, the soul dies and death shows itself as a terrifying event. Epicurus also has a solution for this. Death is not something that concerns us, for what is dissolved no longer has feelings, and what has no feeling is none of our concern. If, as Epicurus claims, the soul is material and it disintegrates at death, we have no more feeling after death. Death does not concern us in this case, because we are no longer there after death. Fear of death is therefore not necessary, for when we are here, death is not here, and when death is here, we are not here anymore. Epicurus makes one exception to his hedonistic principle, specifically in his theory of friendship. A theory that excludes friendship can hardly claim to be hedonistic. Few philosophers discount friendship as an essential part of a happy life. Life becomes lighter, more enjoyable, and more meaningful as we live in friendship. However, a theory that is hedonistic and recommends friendship seems to contradict itself. Friendship always contains altruistic elements. For Epicurus, the solution is to defend the conception of friendship in which the I perspective of the pursuit of pleasure is abolished. We no longer seek pleasure for ourselves, but we take the pleasure of our friends into account in our own search. For example, we feel good when we see our friends happy, but we also suffer when our friends suffer. In this case, one can speak of a feeling of togetherness. Epicurus writes, "Very beautiful is also the sight of our neighbors, when the first feeling of kinship makes us of one mind, or at least strongly inspires us to get that far." For Epicurus, this kind of friendship is the most important. For example, he claims that a secluded life with friends is the most desirable. I therefore conclude this part as follows. Of all the means to complete happiness that wisdom provides us, acquiring friendship is by far the most important. Why do Stoicism and Epicureanism rise in popularity? Both Epicureanism and Stoicism have seen an increase in popularity lately, with the latter taking the crown. There are tons of books and videos on Stoicism being published every day, and this renewed interest shouldn't come as a surprise. Our current time and the time of the Stoics and Epicurists show great resemblance. Stoicism and Epicureanism took flight in the empire of Alexander the Great and the Great Roman Empire. In both instances, we see globalization as a leading factor. As Stoicism and Epicureanism are philosophies of life that focus on the individual's life, it is not hard to understand why they got so popular in those times. During times of globalization, most people experience a feeling of disconnect to the government and society. It is quite frankly impossible to identify with these grand empires, certainly in the way which we could identify in smaller communities. Our own time is characterized by what we call mass globalization. We can identify with people across the world, yet the need for an individual life philosophy is increased as this form of identification is just not possible. Another interesting characteristic is that of secularization. Both in our current day as in the philosophies of Stoicism and Epicureanism, there is not a lot of talk of the transcendent playing a vital role. To conclude, a-taraxia. Pleasure should be found in the absence of pain, not in the joy of fulfilling our desires. I fear that one video on Epicureanism will not convince a lot of people to adhere to this wonderful theory. If you take one thing from this video, let it be the following. While the motto at the entrance to Epicurus' garden is that pleasure is the highest good, there is a silent premise that all pleasure is worthless without the intimate withdrawal that we can experience with our friends. Friendship dances around the world, bidding us all to awake to the recognition of happiness.